Yes, so Elixir is the organization collecting the life science organizations in Europe and has done so for a long time. And Elixir Sweden, or NBIS, is the organization in Sweden then, who is the node in Elixir. Let's see if I can change that. So we are a national digital research infrastructure, I would say, which is a national infrastructure and also platform for bioinformatics at the SciLife Lab, which is a national center for molecular resources in Sweden. And we're a big organization, about 100 staff all over Sweden, spread out. And our mission is to make bioinformatics easily accessible for everybody in Sweden. And we work in support and infrastructure and training, and I'll come back to that a little bit during my talk. And we are funded then by all the universities in Sweden, and also the Research Council, and also from the Wallenberg Foundation. So the Elixir is, in the way I see it at least, it has a very similar mission to EOSC as a whole. And has been around for many years now, with 5 technical platforms for compute and data, tools, interoperability, and training. And you see all of these things are part of EOSC as well. And on top of this then are placed communities. So there are a number of communities formed and operational already, and there are new sort of communities onboarded continuously. And we are also then interacting with a lot of other initiatives in Europe and in the world. And through Elixir and through our node then are then a lot of resources made available to the research community as traditional research infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we do on top of this also. So, but first, to give you some sort of goodies for your dinner parties. So what is data? What kind of data are we talking about, and what are the volumes? So how much data is there in a human cell is something that would, you know, it could be interesting to know. And I mean, a lot of you know that it's 3 billion base pairs of information in a cell, but it actually comes down to 2 meters. So this is how long the chromosomes are that you have in each cell. But you have more than one cell in your body. So how much DNA do you actually carry around in your body? It turns out you have DNA that reach from, that is actually reaching from the Earth to the moon and back 50,000 times. So this is how much DNA each of you carry in your body. And if you think about it, your cells die and you renew them, so you have to synthesize a lot of DNA during your lifetime. And actually, during your lifetime, you will synthesize DNA that will reach almost to the next star. This is what each of you will have in terms of DNA during your lifetime. So that's fun information. And if you take the history lesson here, also interesting to know in terms of genomics, which is sort of the most, the data with the highest volume in the life sciences, I would argue still, imaging is coming. It could be interesting to know also that until 2009, nothing really happened when it comes to data volumes in life science. But since 2009, we have a logarithmic increase in data volumes, and we're at kind of exabyte scale now, and we're going for zettabyte in the next 5 years. So there are 21 zeros in zettabyte. So it's a lot of data that is being produced in the life sciences, that's for sure. We have a slight tendency to end up here, I think, where the data comes almost a burden to the scientist, and we don't know where to, how to handle all this and how to make use of it. And we want, of course, to be here. And digital research infrastructure is a part of the solution here, I think, and to really make data propel things and make science do what science should do, to make discoveries. So if you look at traditional e-infrastructure in the life science, at least, and I think the life sciences has in a lot of ways been pioneering when it comes to fair data and open science. So this is the landscape as it used to be a few years back. You have a few large databases with biological information, and you have your research project, and you might have access to a high-performance computing center. So this is like traditional infrastructure for the life sciences. I think today, what we are as at Elixir Sweden, it looks much more like this. It's much more complex. So we are talking about this. So hardware systems, we are talking about interoperable databases, but we talk a lot about support to users. How do we upskill the community? How do we help people to make sense of all the data? We talk a lot about sort of training and courses and also mentorship programs and so on for PhD students. And of course, on top of the traditional sort of systems and databases, we also have help desk functions and data management plans and data lifecycle plans. We are recruiting so-called data stewards now and trying to upscale that part. And all of these parts also need to talk to each other. So the landscape we're operating in is much more complex than it was 10 or 20 years ago. And if you look at how we use our resources from our infrastructure, only about a third or so is actually for what would be traditionally called an infrastructure, and 2/3 are basically used for this community upskilling part. So we are really heavily investing in making people and the research community follow and learn in this environment. When it comes to EOSC and the EOSC task forces where we're engaged, I think one, as I said in the beginning, the purpose of Elixir as it has been developed is very, very similar to EOSC as a whole. And there is a lot of things existing already that might be different from some of the other communities where not so much exists yet and it has to be built up. But here we have a lot of things in place. And for us, it's a bit of a mapping exercise now to sort of, because Elixir is structured, funded, governed in a very different way from EOSC, and we need to make sure that these two large entities now can talk to each other and that EOSC can really make use of everything that has been done in Elixir already. And we are then engaged in a number of the task forces in EOSC, not the least the upskilling part where we have a leading role. And the Elixir community is now actively trying to make sure that this is fitted as EOSC is starting to evolve and starting to become more operational. We're trying to fit Elixir into this framework, but it is a challenge. So I just wanted to mention a couple of areas where we are operating. One is human health, of course. And this is maybe what people think about a lot when it comes, but we haven't talked so much, at least not today, about the sensitive data. And this is a really big issue for us. And what we are seeing, or I mean, the vision here is that a lot of the data will actually be generated at the hospitals, or is already generated at the hospitals, but there is no obvious way where this kind of floats and becomes available for research so that it can again feed back to new knowledge and make value for the patients at the hospitals again. And then we need to combine this, of course, with all the previous knowledge and larger databases and so biobank samples and so on. So trying to integrate all of these things in a legal framework and in a technical framework is something that we work heavily on and have been working on for a long time. But we have done it with a Swedish perspective, and Finland has done it on a Finnish perspective, and Germany has done it on a German perspective, and to bring it up on a European level now is very challenging. So one way that we address this is through the federated genome archive. So there's a federated solution. So this is not a monolithic system where all the data will be gathered in one central place. So the data, for legal reasons also, will be distributed across all countries, but there will be metadata collected so that all the data is fair in a true sense. It's really findable and accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This system is just being released now, or at least very soon. And it has huge implications for a lot of the visions from the EU. For example, the 1 million genomes project, where it's being stated by a lot of the member states has come together and said that they want 1 million genomes to be accessible for research in the European Union by 2022 already, if I'm not mistaken. And it also links to a lot of other ongoing projects on the European scale, where we want to be able to use compute resources and data across borders in Europe. It also has implications for other types of data. So big picture, for example, is digital pathology, where there are pathology images. And so we're going to reuse the whole underlying database structure that was built for the federated genome data and use that again for imaging data in a similar way. So there are similar projects and for example, proteins, and Elixir has already appointed about 25 what we call Elixir core data resources, which sounds a little bit like the EOSC landmark projects. So as Hans was also alluding to in the beginning, the idea here is that these would be the first in line to have sort of infinite life. These should not be projects. They are too big to sort of ever fail now. And they need to be sustained for a very, very long time period. And we cannot see them as time-constrained projects. And we need to find a funding model that really allows that. And these are also building up. So here's another database that we're engaged in, which is a metabolic atlas that contains a lot of sort of knowledge about chemical reactions in the cell. And you can use, this is put into a framework that we now want to build up as a core resource in Elixir. But it's not only health. So another, as important, I would say, is the biodiversity community, for example, which is another example where more than 200 European partners have now come together and say, okay, we have not enough knowledge about the biodiversity in Europe, and a lot of a large fraction of the species in Europe are actually under threat. About 20% of the macro species are under threat in Europe. And there are now networks and consortia starting to build up the ambition to sequence all species on the planet. And we have been part of collecting a sort of network of 200 European partners where we try to do this on a European level. And there's an EU project starting this fall where we take the first steps towards this ambitious goal. But here the digital research infrastructure is really lacking when it comes to the whole value chain. We have some parts where there is good resources, but we have others that we're really lacking, and where a more holistic view would be beneficial from EOSC side. And you can take that one step further and go into the museums and say biodiversity only makes sense in an evolutionary context, and we can actually do large-scale molecular profiling of museum specimens nowadays. We can even, the world record is actually to sequence a 1 million year old mammoth. And so there is technologies now to not only take a photo of a museum object and so digitalize it in that sense, but we can do large scale molecular profiling of these samples. So this is interesting. So if you look at challenges and opportunities, I think there is a lot of existing efforts that has been done in the life sciences. I think EOSC here might have the main task to collect that and to map this to what is already there, and then take that a step further from what is already happening. But the challenge is the fragmented landscape, and that there are so many stakeholders and initiatives that are ongoing. I think competence buildup is a central piece. And I want to stress again that accessible is not reusable. So annotation or metadata or documentation or whatever you want, what is your favorite word, is really crucial. And then the ethical and legal issues to balance community value with personal risk and integrity is of course a huge issue here for the community to handle. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Björn.
Take any questions.
We have time for one question. Hans Karlsson, please.
Yes, I already asked a lot of questions, but I think you touched, Björn, you touched upon one important thing, and this is the legal issues with sensitive data.
Mm-hmm.
I still notice there are no task force in EOSC about legal issues of sensitive data, because we know the problems within each institution, each country, and now also cross borders. Mm. Do you vision that EOSC could have a role there in setting up a legal task force for sensitive data, or should it be done otherwise?
I think it would be fitting, actually, if you ask me personally. The challenge, as you say, is that the legal it looks, I mean, different in each country, but somehow we need to collect this also. And if we want to have data sharing across borders, it has to be solved how to do that. And if not harmonized, and at least sort of monitor, so we know what is possible and what is not possible. And I don't see anybody really taking this role. And I want to stress, I mean, in Sweden, for example, it's super complicated. So it's not only cross borders, but Sweden actually consists of 21 hospital regions. And just to get those to share data between each other is almost impossible today. So the challenges are really massive. And yes, Hans, I think it will be interesting for us to engage here.